Welcome to Ending the Stigma, a Path to Recovery, a mental health and addiction recovery podcast show. Okay, everybody, welcome back to Ending the Stigma, a Path to Recovery. I'm your host, Fred Carroll, and with me, as always, is the great and amazing, super fantastic, that's all the, what are those adverbs? Adjectives. Those are all the adjectives, right? When you describe a verb.
I didn't do well in English, brother.
Yeah.
So I'll just have to trust you and wait for someone to comment.
you wouldn't think that we have 16 books between us and we're no good in English.
Yeah.
But
well,
that's what editors are for. But welcome to the show. So how are you, Mr. Silverman?
I am well. I just had a colleague visit yesterday. I'm going to change my name here so I can. And he's a doctor. And I said, "What's with my elbow here?" And he leans over and he grabs it and he goes, "Oh, that's tendonitis." I said, "Oh God." So I got my little thing on today and putting some cream on it and trying to avoid blood thinners and any further need for, medical support. I'm not quite sure how. I think I did it loading my daughter's suitcase in the car, triggered it. But I guess it's one of those things that just happens over time. But otherwise, I'm doing good. It's raining here in San Diego. Pretty rare that happens. And it, will fill the reservoirs, hopefully. So otherwise, I'm doing okay. How about you? How you doing?
I'm doing fine. We had snow last night. I woke up this morning to... Listen, it's only about an inch of snow, but it's very rare this late in the year. But the roads were so bad that they had to stop the cars on the highway and put them to the side of the road until it melted because nobody went out it was such a surprise storm. There was no plows, no sanding, nothing. It was a sheet of ice because it was like 33, 32 degrees. So it just froze, and people were trapped. But I didn't have to work today. I went to the dentist. You like the dentist, Scott? You like going to the dentist?
Pretty much like I'd like to have my, one of my fingers removed without anesthesia. No, I'm not a fan of doctors. I don't like needles, and I don't like waiting rooms, and I don't like, I'm trying to work with my doctor right now. They have this thing called, I think it's called My Doc or something. It's an app. You got to get online and then you set up an appointment and, you do the portal, which is really grown to be telehealth, which is what we're doing at Confidential as well. So, but I can't, I get an appointment on Monday, which is not bad. But I'd kind of like to get some, blood thinner if I need it. So it's, no, I don't like the medical world personally to go into it because first of all, it means there's something wrong. Second of all, if there's a needle involved, my heart rate goes up just saying needle involved.
Yeah. Well,
and my buddy yesterday's telling me in my arm, he says, this little brace will help and putting some of this cream on over the counter and that should take it away. But I did some research and it's 6 to 12 months for something like this to go away, kind of like plantar fasciitis. And then he says, otherwise we bring you the office and give you a cortisone shot, or he says we can numb your arm and I can take and put 40 needles in it to relieve the blood that's around the problem and it should take care of it. I said, 40 needle injections. I said, I almost fainted. I was feeling my heart rate raise just having him describe it. I can't do that. I mean, if it's an emergency, but I ain't going to voluntarily put my arm out there.
I was similar to a point, but I just went through 3 knee procedures in 3 weeks where they injected 3 needles total each Monday. So the first needle is to numb the knee and then 2 needles each on each side of my knee. And the first time I was nervous, so I was waiting to feel the pain and I didn't feel it. The second time I watched on the screen as the doctor was wiggling the needle in my knee and filling each gap. It was they used the same thing they use for pregnancy, the ultrasound, so they could see inside my knee and fill all the gaps. Whether or not it works, who knows? But I do like the dentist. I'm a fan of the dentist, and I'll tell you why. And maybe this relates to stigmas and stuff because I didn't have a lot of money when I was younger. and I ignored my teeth because it's very expensive to go to the dentist. And what I did was I made sure my children were covered and never took care of myself. Now that I'm in a different situation, I'm excited to be able to take care of my teeth. And it does come down to a mental health type thing, because I do believe smiling does, whenever you're holding back a smile because you don't want to show your teeth, that can't be good for your mental health. You know, you should be able to be free with it.
You know, in my old organization, we taught smiling. And one of my great lines was, if you only have one tooth, show it, because when you're smiling, everything sounds better. And generally speaking, you feel better putting your facial expression into a smile. No, I agree with that, you know, but for me, whenever I go to the dentist, it's usually, you know, you get older and things break down. I mean, I'm glad when I leave, and I'm glad I went when I go, because I usually fix something that if they don't fix it, it's not going to get better on its own. So I don't ever suggest people not go to a doctor. My mom was funny. She was the same way. She used to hate to go to doctors. And
well, I would say preventive care moves us into the Taylor Hawkins stuff with the Foo Fighters, because it has been reported that his heart was twice the size of a normal heart. And
where did that information, you know, I understand they had and that was so sad. I mean, I don't really, you know, the Foo Fighters, I just kind of got familiar with the last few years, but reading about it and listening, and I saw them interviewed a few times, the people that they touch, and, you know, bringing kids up on stage. And I have not heard any details. All I heard was the first, you know, 24 hours somehow in Colombia, they got a toxicology report and said there were 10 different medications in his system. I don't know how they get a toxicology report that quickly. So I have no idea. And if you're talking about a heart, I mean, have they done an autopsy already?
Yeah, well, they did they must have, if they knew his heart. They had the weight of his heart and everything in kilograms or whatever the size weight distribution is that they use.
Well, then they did an autopsy, because the only way to weigh a heart, you know, is outside of the body, unless they did an ultrasound or measure or something. But
and they said that it was twice the weight of a man his age in size. So that would be a preventive care thing where it went unnoticed. It just goes to show. I was explaining to somebody, you know, last week you probably would have said you would gladly trade places with Taylor Hawkins to be a rock star, be rich, travel the world. But would you say that today? Would you be willing to be dead at the age of 50? Probably not. No. You know, so it is perspective. There's perspective that goes into money is not everything, and it does not solve health issues. In fact, it probably makes his lifestyle makes drug addiction harder to control, because it's handed to you. It's right in front of you.
Do we know, have they said that he had a substance use disorder? I mean, clearly 10 different medications in your body could send a glaring message. I mean, I certainly don't want to jump to any conclusions. But obviously, if he had been in pain, you know, maybe he was taking something for pain. But on the other hand, I don't want to speculate till I hear, because it's easy to make the assumption with 10 different drugs. The odds are he may have had a drug problem, but I don't want to go there yet. Have you read anything that said that people around him have said anything? And I would tend to think, as straightforward as that group is, they'll probably tell the truth, and because they want people to know and learn from it.
Yeah. So as far as I know, he did overdose on heroin back in the 90s. And, you know, I'm looking at some of the articles now just to see preliminary. I'll go to the preliminary from CNN, the preliminary tox report. So it says, a preliminary forensic medical study Saturday following the death of Foo Fighters drummer Taylor Hawkins. The report said a urine toxicology test was carried out on Hawkins, and 10 substances were found, including THC, tricyclic antidepressants, benzopines, and opioids. Now, it doesn't, you know, it added the National Institute of Forensic Medicine continues to medical studies to achieve total clarification of the event that led to the death. So it's just, I believe I had read where 4 months after he joined the Foo Fighters, he overdosed on heroin. And I've been listening to some of the, like, Perry Farrell was just on. Perry Farrell is the lead singer of a band called Jane's Addiction. That was very popular and very close to Taylor. And I was listening to, all of us are assuming, I guess, but I was listening to the final voice message that he left that night to him, and he definitely sounds medicated. I don't know in what way, maybe a little high, which is, obviously fine in my book if you're going to, as long as it's your choice and that's something you need to, maybe he needs to mellow out before a show or whatever it is, whatever his reason to smoke his pot. And I don't know, I'm assuming it's legal there anyway in Bogota, Colombia, since all the drugs, a lot of the drugs come from there. But I just don't know. I guess there's not enough information yet. I know the Foo Fighters themselves have flown back to L.A., and they're all back. And it's got to be devastating for someone like Dave Grohl because he's already lost one best friend, lead singer in one band. It's hard to feel sorry for the guy. The guy's going to carry on and be famous, but this was like his best friend. I mean, they were inseparable, those two. And, that's tough for anybody. And I know it's hard for people out there that aren't rock stars and stuff to poo-poo about poor Taylor Hawkins, but it is news, and hopefully it becomes a positive where we could turn into something.
Make it one. And it's interesting, the four medications you just mentioned, I mean, having benzos and opioids in your system obviously are pretty tough on the body. But I thought I read somewhere that he was also on prescribed medication, maybe for anxiety or stress or, taking something to sleep. And that's the thing, we've talked about this before, that cocktail that people put in their body, those things, when they're put together, are just a catastrophic event. So it's pretty, and if he already had a situation going on with his heart, it's possible that the combination of what he had in his system and, maybe over time it just eroded and he just, it exploded and took his life, which is kind of sad at 50. I mean, you got to stay in pretty good shape to do the kind of work he did, but traveling and time zones and who knows. I don't want to speculate, but it's all
speculation, but we'll continue to talk about it through the next weeks as we learn more information. But it is sad regardless. And it's sad when anybody, it doesn't matter that it's Taylor Hawkins or who, it's sad when this happens to anyone. And,
right.
He is, regardless of his fame and fortune, he earned that. He earned all his fame and he earned all his money. He still leaves behind a wife, 3 children. Sure, financially they're probably set up well, but emotionally money does not solve all those problems.
Trauma of a loss of a loved one is in some ways irreparable. I mean, you can certainly work through it and it takes a long time, but that loss, especially someone like that could probably walk on water in some people's eyes, and especially the families and the things that he got to do with his kids. And even if they, with all the money in the world, they could go do them all again without dad, I can't even imagine what that feels like for that family. And I've seen a lot of, people suffer and lose loved ones. I mean, I lost a brother at a, young age, and it's something that, it just doesn't go away in your head. And some people try to make it go away and it gets even worse for them when they self-medicate around it. But I hope that I have the feeling from what I've seen with these guys that once they, the dust settles and they get through, whatever they need to get through to get closure, they'll make a positive out of it. I really think they will.
Yeah. Let's hope. Dave Grohl seems to be a very decent human being who's very honest with his fans, and he's a drinker and stuff. I don't think he's doing drugs any longer, but now I don't know. You just never know what's going on in these guys' lives, and it's just it's still part of the scene, obviously, if it's a problem, and this isn't the only problem. But it did.
We just lost a local guy. He was really, he was a producer and a co-producer, and his cohort was in a band, and they did a TV show every day. And I've been on his radio and TV show a couple different times. And his partner, they were just recording 2 weeks ago. And after the last set, he passed away right there, just fell down and never woke up. And, he's one of those people that's been in front of the public for decades, and everyone knows who he is. And just a great guy. Rusty Nails was his name. Yes, that was his stage name. Rusty Nailed, Nailz, I believe. And that was just catastrophic. And I don't know if have we spoken. I told you a young guy that I knew at 41 years old, just, he lost his life, fell asleep and never woke up, 41 years old. And I don't know what happened there, but it's just, life is too short. And I think it's important that we remind ourselves that self-care is important. Doing what we need to do is important. And, let's pivot over to last night, the back half of,
Yeah, there's several things from last night. First, I'd start by saying that the movie that won Best Movie, called Coda, is I don't know if you've seen it yet, but I think you and your... I think my wife said we saw the movie a couple of weeks ago, and I'm like, I don't remember any of it, and that's not unlike me. And so she swears she saw it, but it's beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful film, and it has to do with the stigma of deafness. Obviously, it's about how people judge, like a young girl growing up in high school dealing with deaf parents, and she's the hearing. I was just watching it again when you chimed in to start this show, and she had just said a line that to one of the boys in it, that you don't know what it's like when somebody constantly is making fun of your family. And she said, what the problem is they can't hear it, but I can. And that's part of the stigma of it is, and it's about bullying. There's a lot of bullying in it and a lot of growth in it. But the acting is superb. It's one of those shows you got to watch, obviously, because it's a lot of hand signals, because it's dealing with deafness and music and stuff. So it's genius done. But I know what you'd like to talk about. Moving on to that is the Chris Rock and Will Smith dilemma that happened. Was it a slap? Was it not a slap? I say... definitely was a slap, because at this point, I think they would have been forced to come out and say it was all set up at this point, because it's blown up so big. I definitely see a mental health issue here.
Well, it's fascinating because I some of the commentary that I've seen today, people are taking a position that, Will Smith, it's Will Smith, and he's never done anything like that before, and he obviously wanted to protect his wife, and when you physically touch somebody in a violent way, it's really hard to walk it back. And I thought it was a stunt at first, and then my oldest was with us, who's a family law attorney, and all the feeds on the internet, there was some raw footage that came out of Australia. Somehow their part wasn't blocked out, and watching what he said after he sat down, and then when he won, this is what Best Actor, he talked about love and supporting family, and it just, to your point, that the switch was flipped there clearly, and I don't know how to take what he did. And I've been a Will Smith fan for a long time, but a Will Smith fan of his movies,
right,
and his movie stardom. But I just think that was so mean to lash out. But I don't know what was in Will's head when he heard what he heard. And then was Chris Rock's comments, was it scripted, or did he go off script?
Well, it definitely wasn't scripted. It definitely wasn't scripted, because if it was scripted, whenever I was reading this from Steve Bluestein, who is a comedian that works out of LA, and he was explaining behind the scenes of Academy Awards. Whenever a comedian goes on and it does something scripted, it goes through a system of people who either accept it or tell you not to say it. So it definitely was Chris Rock being given the freedom to knowing that he's a pro. And I think he proved he was a pro last night because he could have easily lashed back, and he took it, I don't want to say like a man, because that would be, that would be a negative.
But he seemed like he was in shock. And then the words that follow up, and to think about the platform, I mean, they both knew where they were, and they both probably had some presence of mind that, tens of millions of people are watching this right now. Maybe that didn't go through their head at that moment, but they know when they rehearse and they go up and they're told the audience is going to be X, Y, and Z big, that he knew that, and they both knew that. And I think he was probably just in shock. He thought maybe Will was playing when he walked up, because he could say, "Oh," and then all of a sudden he gets smacked, and you could. But he's a professional, so he stayed in character. But most people would have either, like you said, lashed out or
reacted,
walked off stage, and just not knowing what to do. And he kind of hung in there.
Yeah,
and it was amazing.
It was shocking. I felt it. I didn't know what was going on. It was so confusing.
Did you watch it in real time? Were you watching it in real time as well?
Yeah, I was watching it live. I'm a huge fan of these award shows. I loved it. I know there's naysayers out there, but I just still love it. And I think it goes back to my mother loving it. It was a connection we had for some reason, and that stays with you. But I have more of a problem with, first of all, Chris Rock is a comedian. Will Smith is aware of this. Did he cross the line? He did if he knew it was due to alopecia, but I don't think he did know that. I didn't know that. I had no idea. I don't watch her show where she admitted this and stuff. I didn't know any of this. To me, it was just a short haircut, him making a Demi Moore joke, basically, about her shaving her head to do G.I. Jane. It was innocent. It could have easily passed. He laughed. Will Smith laughed at it initially when they went to him.
So did she. I think they kind of looked at each other and thought it was comedic. And then I guess she kind of processed for a second or two. He saw her facial expression.
Yeah, she rolled her eyes.
Yeah, he went into defense mode. And today I read that she said, one of the quotes was, "That's how we roll."
Yeah, she's a different type of person. So first of all, she's also admitted to infidelity in the marriage. Now, this is another problem I have. The comedians, the female comedians, also took shots at her early on. There was one scene where she was pretending to bring men backstage to test them for COVID, and she said one of them was married, and then she said, "Will, you could come back." Jada said it was okay because they claimed to have an open marriage, and they made shots at her about that, but he doesn't go up and punch the woman in the face, or slap her or anything, which is good, I assume. But and
you got to wonder, what if there was a female, and one of the hosts was a female, what if she the one who made a statement like that?
Well, would they have responded the same? What if it was The Rock instead of Chris Rock? Would he have gone up there and smacked The Rock in the face? Probably not. So it is a bully tactic at the same time, taking advantage. But in the long run, what Will Smith did do, in my eyes, is he took away from his own moment. He just took away that's his first Oscar win, I believe. I'm assuming.
Yeah, he's been nominated 3 times. This is the first time he's won, I believe. Yeah.
And what do you remember about it? You remember the slap. You remember the slap. That's all you remember. You don't remember the speech was.
But I do remember the speech. But here's the thing. I was so focused on thinking about all the young people or people watching that, and it was clear this morning, the LAPD looked into it. Chris Rock does not want to press charges. So you got to ask yourself, are other people getting, as sensitive as people are right now and as unusual as how people are reacting to different things? Imagine what people are thinking, that, if this guy can do this in such a public way and there's no consequences around it. And he didn't even really, listen to his client. He apologized to the Academy, but not to Chris Rock. And maybe they have history somewhere. And this was, pressure bust pipes. We talk about that all the time.
Well, they do. They do have a history, but they also have a friendship history at the same time. They have a friendship history, but when Chris Rock was hosting in 2019, 18, whatever, one of those years, there was a big, remember the movie Concussion with Will Smith? About the NFL players and the concussion protocol. Well, Jada Pinkett was upset that Will Smith did not get nominated for that, which he probably should have. It was a great job he did. But she was complaining that she's boycotting the Oscars. She's not doing this, not doing that. He made a joke that Jada Pinkett boycotting the Oscars is like him boycotting Rihanna's panties. I wasn't invited. You weren't invited. That's what he said. That was the joke. But supposedly they got over all that. And supposedly they're going to get over this, too, and may have already. Chris Rock did not show up at the Vanity Fair after party as he was supposed to. Will Smith did. They thought they'd meet up there and talk it out. And I'm sure they will. They're going to have to spin this. The press is going to spin it, the PR. But this does not help. There's no positives that come out of this. Besides, maybe you could make a mistake and amend a mistake. Maybe that's the only positive that comes out if Will Smith spins it correctly.
Well, I got to tell you, though, there's a line, Fred, that when you physically put your hand on somebody else and you have contact like that, there is no taking that back. And even if he was in a drunken rage, for example, there might be some rationale around that. But he's sitting in the front row and he knows he's on camera the whole time. So he knew he had to know everything he was going to do would be recorded. I mean, he probably wasn't of clear mind. He was reacting in pain for his wife, I'm assuming. And he just didn't want that moment to go by without him doing. I mean, he went up, slapped, then he came back and he yelled at him. And it's like, that just seems like such unusual behavior in that kind of a situation. He could have done it afterwards. He could have gone backstage. He could have hit him at the party, but to do it on camera, to have that happen on camera, you have to have a lot of either comfortability. You can do whatever you want to do. And to me, all of the domestic violence people who are advocates they're not going to take lightly to this. And I saw some, and then hopefully they don't make this somehow a black thing, because here it is, two African-American men in a situation where one's hitting the other. And we're in a society now where violence is at an all-time high and extreme violence, not throwing things at each other, but pulling up a knife, taking out a gun, shooting to schools. What was it last week? Or the week before, where they had like 9 shootings in the South. I mean, at 6 different cities. So the violence it's people just think, not that they think, that just it's somehow in their head. We're okay with this. This is okay. I feel strongly, so I'm just going to act out.
Right. So there is backstory on Will Smith also, where in his book, I was listening to Howard Stern this morning, who I'm a huge fan of, by the way, but he was talking about, from Will Smith's book, he read some quotes, and this came out in like 2016. He said one of his biggest regrets was watching his father punch his mother. And it was one of his biggest regrets in life that he stood there and watched it and did not step in, even though he was a young boy and stuff. But he allowed it. This all plays a role, and this is where life plays a role in everything. Of course, timing also plays a role in everything. Like you were saying, this could have been taken care of off camera just as easily. It had a lot of desperation in it. Like, I don't think he really wanted to be there. This is between his marriage being a struggle, because she admitted her infidelity in a live setting to Will Smith on her show. She invited him on her show called The Red Table or something like that. It's on Facebook.
And was that the first time he was hearing it?
Well, I believe so, to a point, because he was asking questions like, basically they were talking stuff out. There were, the side story to it is they were separated at the time, but she did step out, and it was with one of her son's friends. He's only like 25 years old. All those things that emasculate you as a man took place. And he continued to ask questions to her like, well, what do you mean? How far did it go? But who could tell anymore with these actors? They're so good. Are they acting? Is it scripted? Is it unscripted? They don't tell you these things. But even that book excerpt that he talks about, that's got to play a role. It's still there in your mind. You feel like now you got to protect. There's people coming out saying, okay, that's what a man does. He protects his woman. Okay, and he mentioned love makes you do crazy things. That's not a good enough excuse anymore, because that's exactly what male abusers say to their wives. They say, well, I hit her because I love her, and stuff like that. The physicality of it does not render.
What did Howard Stern say about it today?
Well, he basically said Will Smith is no better than Putin. Basically, it was his quote.
Really?
He said Will Smith and Putin are the same person, and they are lashing out, and he is wrong and all this stuff. But Howard Stern also has a relationship with Chris Rock, so there is some bias, I'm sure, tied into it.
And you know what the president's been saying, and what they were saying about him in Poland the other day, that Putin's a monster and he's slaughtering people, and he's not listening to the people around him, and he doesn't seem to care about life. So I mean, it's interesting comparing him to Putin, because Putin, they're saying, is like Adolf Hitler.
Some of the problem with the Ukraine stuff now, though, is now the Ukrainians are doing things that you never want to see, and they are executing soldiers, Russian soldiers, and that's not being talked about, but that's just a different subject altogether. But, I'm so tired of politics, the one way that everybody's got their one belief and they just follow it blindly and they just go with it. They can't ever say, oh, wait, that's wrong. They'll spin anything. If you're anti-Trump and you mention something to a Trump person, they will spin it in his favor. And if it's the opposite, they'll spin it in, gas prices, all this stuff. I'm just tired of it. I don't even watch the news. I honestly don't. I need a good news network, where it's nothing but puppies and sunflowers or something. I don't know. Sounds good to me. But overall, you do believe, it's hard to say who's wrong in this situation. Perhaps they're both wrong. You could both be wrong. And maybe Chris Rock did step over a line that we're unaware of. I think as a comedian, he did his job and just cracked a light joke. He did try to explain that wasn't a joke against Jada Pinkett. That was a G.I. Jane joke, not a Jada Pinkett joke.
Yeah. And look, there's wrong, there's inappropriate, wasn't thoughtful, and then last night I remember seeing, because I had missed the part where I guess they did a public service announcement about Ukraine, but I saw a commercial or a public service announcement about, somebody was holding a dog and how we need to, get dogs out of shelters. And there's a guy here in San Diego that actually is going over to Ukraine. He runs one of the bigger, humane societies here and pet rescue facilities. And I'm thinking, oh my God, we're talking about saving dogs. And I know that's important in animals, and I remember, being somebody who's worked with the homeless for like almost 3 decades, listening to, some of these fundraisers when we talk about saving animals. It's like we don't even hear the conversations around saving people. And it's just, I don't know, it's baffling to me.
I believe what you're referring to is during the In Memoriam, Jamie Lee Curtis came out with a puppy. And she was talking about Betty White, though. And Betty White was a big advocate for animal rescue. And I think it fit and it made sense in that context. But I understand what you're talking about, especially being in L.A. and where homeless people are. There is a great video out there, and I'll shoot it over to you after the show, of a man who decided to befriend a homeless gentleman named Tony. And instead of, Tony had a sign that said, we'll work for food, basically, $5 an hour, whatever, do anything. And the guy hired him, but instead he took him to Disneyland. He said, because I recognized Tony needed a friend, not money. It wasn't money he needed a friend. Well, he took him to Disneyland, then he took him to the doctor, then he took him to the dentist, then he took him shopping, then he became his friend for real, hooked him up with a hotel room, got him housing, got him a job, and then revisited him a year later and showed him with a full set of teeth and how happy he is and how loved he is. And not everybody could afford to do that or do that on a time. And there are people out there that say, stop videotaping yourself giving a hamburger or two. But in this instance, I think it was a good video to show what you can do when you just listen, to someone. And it's a good video, whether it's punched up or anything, or who knows, it could be actors for all we know, you just don't know. But, well, I think that filled a lot of the time. I mean, listen, we didn't mention the word fentanyl, and that's good because it's still there, though, people. It's still there. And I will end it by saying that a friend of mine lost her child this week to fentanyl. So, yeah. And unfortunately, this was a instance that it's a strange instance for me because this person's son actually robbed me at one point. And that's how I met the mother and I became her friend. And years have gone by. This 15 years ago, he robbed me. He was actually in prison. I don't know the whole story. She told me some of it, but this was the day of. He was actually in prison in Florida for fentanyl sale. And for some reason, he should have been in for 10 years, she said. They let him out, and he overdosed immediately that night. She didn't even know he was out. And she talks about, I feel bad because as a parent, I understand losing a child doesn't matter how. Doesn't matter how it hurts. And she had cut him off. She hasn't even seen him in 3.5 years. She cut him off completely like she had to. She didn't have a choice. But didn't mean she didn't love him. And people confuse that sometimes. They forget that she's still the one that gave birth to him, raised him,
Yeah, I hear you.
It's a struggle for her. She's struggling right now. So she listens to our show from time to time, and hopefully she hears this. But we do care about stuff like that. We hate to see it regardless. But she does mention something where she knew this day was coming. She just didn't know when, and she didn't realize it would still hurt. And I think that's important for people to know that it does. You can't be prepared for it. You just are never prepared to lose your child. Yeah. And it's horrible. But, okay, so you want to give your phone number out?
Sure, 619-993-2738. 619-993-2738. Call, text me, Google me, Scott H. Silverman, yourcrisiscoach.com. Let's talk. Let's avoid going to a funeral this week.
Yeah, and also make sure you're listening to Scott's Happy Hour with Scott H. Silverman, which I was a guest on last week. That should be coming up soon, right? I would think. Mm-hmm. My appearance, my amazing appearance. If you're
day after tomorrow, your amazing appearance should be coming up. Yeah. So look for that.
Okay, so that's going to be it for Ending the Stigma. And I will end the show by saying, if no one has told you they love you today, we love you. That's Scott and myself and everybody else in the world. So hopefully we will be back next week. And that's it for Ending the Stigma. So nice to see you again, Scott, and we will talk again soon.
Take care, Fred.
Thank you. Ending the Stigma, A Path to Recovery is produced by Venom Studios. Copyright 2022 by Venom Podcast Studios. The show is hosted by life coach and author Scott H. Silverman and author Fred Carroll. Our intention is to reduce all stigmas and to provide information that isn't discussed enough. If you or someone you know has an issue, please contact your local authorities or substance abuse counseling centers for help. The suicide hotline could be reached by dialing 1-800-273-8255 or simply text the word HOME to 741-741 for free 24/7 counseling. Scott H. Silverman's information could be found by visiting his website at yourcrisiscoach.com. And to learn more about author Fred Carroll, please visit www.venomstudios.com. That's studios with a Z. And remember, if no one has told you they love you today, we love you. This has been Ending the Stigma.